Who are Gog and Magog in the biblical prophecy? The mention of Gog and Magog appears both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, specifically in the books of Ezekiel in the Old Testament and Apocalypse in the New Testament. However, there are notable differences in the way these passages are interpreted, 039, and there is no universally agreed interpretation. Gog and Magog symbolize something sinister. Related to the end of times, they also represent historical peoples that existed shortly after the time of Noah and explode in scene in Ezekiel 38 and Ezekiel 39. Gog and Magog in the Old Testament, reading the book of Ezekiel, it may be difficult to differentiate which visions belong to the situation of Israel during the context of the book, and which foretold events that would come at the end of time, and which are in both categories. In the Old Testament, the term Gog is found in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. Gog is described as a leader or ruler of the land of Magog. The passage portrays a prophecy of a future invasion of Israel by Gog, along with a collision of other nations. The prophecy says that God will miraculously intervene to protect Israel, destroying Gog's forces with the fire of heaven and other natural calamities. This divine intervention serves as a sign for the nations and as a manifestation of the holiness and sovereignty of God. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, turn your face against Gog, of the land of Magog, prince of Mesech and Tubal. Prophesy against him and say, Thus says the sovereign Lord, I am against you, Gog, prince chief of Mesech and Tubal. I will make you turn, I will put hooks in your jaws, and I will take you out with all your army, your horses, your fully armed knights, and a large horde with large and small shields, all of them with their swords. Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 1 to 4. Son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, Thus says the sovereign Lord, I am against you, Gog, prince chief of Mesech and Tubal. To the north I will send you against the mountains of Israel. Then I will attack your bow with your left hand, and I will make your arrows fall with your right hand. Over the mountains of Israel you will fall, you and all your troops, and the nations that are with you. I will give you as food to all species of carnivorous birds and wild animals. Ezekiel chapter 39, verses 1 and 2. We see Gog make a brief appearance earlier in 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 4, as a descendant of a prophet named Joel. The descendants of Joel, his son Semias, his son Gog, his son Simei, his son Michael, his son Reaias, his son Baal, and his son Bera, the hot-blooded Pileser, king of Assyria, led to exile. Some conjectured about the specific kingdom of Magog, which sought to destroy Israel, Lydia, Saba, Scythia, or perhaps the Seleucids. Another example of Magog seems to be a son of Japheth, one of the three sons of Noah. Genesis chapter 10, verse 2, 1 Chronicles chapter 1, verse 5. In both cases, it seems that a nation or many nations, 4:38, will unite against Israel and will not resist the powers of the Almighty God. We also know that they are, or were, skilled warriors coming from kingdoms to the north of Israel, but again, we do not receive many details about them except that they seem to be a threat. Gog and Magog, at the end of the times of the Apocalypse in the New Testament. The term Gog and Magog is mentioned in the book of Apocalypse, specifically in Apocalypse chapter 20, verses 7 to 10. Here, Gog and Magog are mentioned in the context of the final battle at the end of the world. The Apostle John reports that at the end of the millennium, Satan will be released for a while and will go out to deceive the nations that are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, in order to gather them for battle. Its number is like the sand of the sea. Apocalypse chapter 20, verse 8. John continues the narrative saying that the nations persuaded by Satan will surround the camp of the saints, the beloved city, but the fire will come down from heaven and devour them, resulting still in the eternal condemnation of Satan in the lake of fire, which burns like sulfur. After that, John begins to describe in detail the scene of the final judgment, Gog and Magog, and the different eschatological currents. We know that there are different eschatological currents, and each of them has a specific view about this subject. Those who defend the future millennial reign and literal of Christ on earth after his second coming affirm that this battle of Gog and Magog will occur at the end of this period, when Satan is literally released again to deceive the nations. It is also worth saying that some premillennials defend that this battle will occur before the millennium. However, I believe that this statement is a contradiction with the very thought that they defend. Therefore, following this reasoning, there will be two great final battles. Battle of Armageddon before the millennium, and described in chapter 19 of the Apocalypse, and the Battle of Gog and Magog after the millennium, and described in chapter 20 of the Apocalypse. Among the defenders of this position, there are many divergences about this event, so that it would be impossible to quote each of them. The most common understand that this Battle of Gog and Magog refers to the joining of several nations to attack Israel in the future. The theories about this are so specific that even names of nations have already been suggested, among them Russia, Iran, China, Japan, and India. Since those who do not defend a future literal reign of Christ on earth, understanding that the millennium precedes the second coming of Christ, usually states that this battle is the same as described in chapter 19, that is, Armageddon. Interpretations of Ezekiel 38 and 39. It is necessary to understand that the book of Ezekiel has an intense use of symbolic elements in its prophecies in the type of apocalyptic language. The chapters 38 and 39 of the book of Ezekiel, which are clearly prophetic, really have some interpretation difficulties. Scholars share different opinions. Perhaps one of the best-known theories is the one that identifies Mezek Tubal as the Russian cities of Moscow and Tobolsk, and the Prince of Rus, quoted in verse 2, as the Prince of Russia. That is, Gog would be the Russian commander who will attack Israel in the future. Others identify Gog as Giggs, a king of Libya, known in the Akkadian texts of the 7th century BC as a vassal of the Assyrians. A good interpretation on the subject suggests that Ezekiel's prophecy refers to the power of the Seleucids, especially with Antiochus Epiphanes, a terrible enemy of the Jewish people, whose center of his kingdom was located in the north of Syria. To the north, the domain of the Seleucids included Mezek Tobal, districts of Asia Minor. According to this interpretation, the persecution imposed by Gog and Magog refers to Ezekiel, the harsh persecution imposed by the ruler of Syria, Antiochus Epiphanes, under the people of God. Ezekiel also refers in general to the final battle against the people of God, so that what happened to Antiochus Epiphanes typifies an even greater persecution, as the text itself states that this army would rise at the end of the days. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 8. The role of Gog and Magog in the Apocalypse. The expression Gog and Magog refers to the final attack of the anti-Christian forces led by Satan against the Church of Christ. John identifies Gog and Magog as the nations that are in the four corners of the earth, that is, it is not a specific nation, but the totality of the world, that is, the persecution of the world iniquity against the church. John highlights that the army of this battle is very numerous, as much as the sand of the sea. In the days of the government of Antiochus Epiphanes, the people of Israel seemed defenseless before the power of the Syrian army. In the same way, in the last days that precede the return of Christ, the oppression will be so great that the church will appear defenseless before the persecuting power of the world. Another interesting fact is that despite intense and severe, the domain of Antiochus Epiphanes had a short duration, as will be the short period of time of great tribulation on earth, as Jesus warned in his eschatological sermon. Mark chapter 13 verse 20. As Satan is the greatest opponent of Christ, naturally his fall is narrated last. This is exactly what happens in chapter 20. Although there are different opinions on the subject, the important thing is that all of them agree that in this battle Satan will be condemned eternally in the lake of fire and sulfur, and day and night together with his allies will be tormented. Christ will finally defeat once and for all the forces of darkness, and his church will reign with him eternally in a world without wars or sin.